Saving costs and improving the consumer experience aren't the only reasons companies are putting more AI and tech in shopping than ever before. They might not have a choice. By the end of 2025, Taiwan is set to become a super-aged society with a rapidly shrinking labor force. And it's not alone. So could innovations in the retail and service sectors fill the gap? To help us break this down and hear what developments we can expect to see in the retail space over the next few years, we're joined by Kate Ancketill, CEO and founder of GDR Creative Intelligence, a retail consultancy. Now, before I get your thoughts on this issue, Kate, I want us to take a listen to Issa Saito, who opened a number of unstaffed stores in Japan, and he's now trying the model out in Taiwan. As both countries are struggling with aging populations, I asked him if he thought this could be a solution to shrinking labor pools.
Yeah, we're very difficult to hiring some good person. Of course, in Japan, we also have difficulties to find person and to manage. So I think the Unmanned store is a good solution.
So do you think that a store with no staff could be the future of retail and the service industry?
Yeah, I think so. This is maybe the new way. I think the customer is also good for customers, because if Unmanned, it's no stress, no pressure to buy something to see the shops.
Sometimes you don't want people asking you, bothering you a lot. Sometimes you just want to, shop in peace.
Yeah, like shopping peace, yeah.
Now, Kate, I know you've touched on this, but do you think unstaffed stores could be a solution to labour shortages when we will inevitably be continuing to see aged societies?
We are certainly moving towards that direction. I think at the moment we are seeing that kind of hybrid system of, where you used to have in grocery, everyone had to queue at a checkout to go through a checkout desk and say hello to the person, and they scanned all your items. That does feel rather quaint and old-fashioned these days. But you still usually have a combination of both those things. Like you may have, half self-checkout and or the other half being for the old-fashioned version. Or you have one staff member kind of dealing with, 50 self-checkouts or something. So each of those self-checkout units is itself becoming quite a sophisticated piece of kit. So that is like a robot in itself. Usually it's using artificial intelligence with computer vision to monitor the items that are being swiped through so that you can see the visual of whether it is what the person is saying it is, and not just, coordinating a similar weight. But then you often do have to have that human assistance, don't you? Because these things go wrong. They go wrong all the time. And we all have that frustration of having to call over an associate to basically fix the robot that we're using to check out. So I think as things improve, we will see more of them. We'll see more AI deployed to identify whether people are behaving strangely, which will correlate with theft, for example. And I think they'll get better so that people will find them less problematic, and then we'll just be quicker and more efficient. So the question is, there's no question about, will we have more self-checkout? Absolutely, we will. But the question is, will we have bipedal humanoid robots anytime soon, kind of picking items up off the floor and folding garments and putting them on shelves and speaking to people and walking to the stockroom and getting stuff? Now, I personally don't see that happening in the next, say, 5 years, because I don't think humanoid robots are actually quite there yet in terms of interacting safely with an extraordinarily complex real-world scenario where you've got toddlers running around and things falling on the floor and, trip hazards, and you've got mirrors, and LiDAR can't cope with reflective surfaces. And I think the AI in the traditional sense is not up to that task just yet. I think we will get there, though, particularly if we deploy I say we, whether the robotics industry increasingly deploys things like neuromorphic computing, which is better able to manage a complex physical retail environment. So if you start to combine the sort of more animal programming of robotic brains that you get with neuromorphic computing, and you combine that with a large language model with sort of slightly more traditional AI for things like language and, you know, understanding human communication, then I think you do start to move perhaps within the next 5 to 10 years into a world where you may have bipedal humanoid robotics within both domestic and retail settings, and not just, as we currently see, within very kind of formal and controlled settings of kind of manufacturing where you do the same thing over and over again, which is certainly already there for robotics.
And on those kind of innovations, I mean, we've talked just about kind of Asia and aging populations, but it's something that also is a big problem in Europe and the US. But what's the biggest differences you see in kind of those retail innovations across those regions comparatively?
There are huge differences, actually, I think, between East Asia in terms of live streaming. I mean, you know, on the e-commerce side of things, live streaming is absolutely huge in East Asia and hasn't really taken off in Europe and the US. You know, lots of people have wondered why this hasn't worked. Amazon's tried it, for example. It just kind of hasn't sparked the zeitgeist. It's not cool. I guess we in the West have things like QVC we've had for many years, and it's not associated with kind of young, hip people. It's more associated with perhaps the older demographic, people who are perhaps retired and sort of watching daytime TV. It's not associated with you know, the kind of youth culture the way it is in East Asia. So I think that's one big difference. Another big difference is there seems to be a lot more money being spent on extraordinary immersive flagship spaces in East Asia. I mean, I think of the most extraordinary retail space I think I've ever seen in my life is House Nowhere in Shenzhen, which is a Gentle Monster, kind of massive flagship. I mean, it is just extraordinary with these enormous sort of multi-story humanoid sculptures and the animatronics. And, you know, that isn't the kind of retail that we have in the West. You know, we do have extraordinary luxury flagships from people like, you know, Louis Vuitton and so on, but they're not so kind of so much of a mix of huge, expansive ambition with combining art and kind of museum and extraordinary animatronics. And, you know, the expense of these places by Western standards is just sort of unthinkable. We just don't have that kind of budget in the West that we do seem to see still in East Asia, you know, despite the slowdown in luxury retail.
And back to that live streaming, the whole thing of live streaming, because I think it's a really interesting part of how things work, and especially in China, it's huge. But for some of our audience who might not know about this concept, could you just kind of explain a little bit of how it's used and why you think it's so popular and works? I mean, in this part of the world.
Yes, in the East you call them key opinion leaders, and in the West we tend to call them you know, influencers. But basically it's people who know a lot about a particular subject, who are very usually charismatic and, you know, fantastically entertaining, and they talk about the product or the sector or the category that they know about. It might be beauty, or it might be electronics, or whatever it is. That you follow them because, you know, you align with their ethics, you like their character, you like their product knowledge, and they can sell enormous amounts of product in seconds. They can sell millions of lipsticks or handbags or whatever it is that they're an expert in. And, you know, people absolutely love these key opinion leaders. And, you know, they feel authentic, you feel you know them, they feel like a friend, you trust them, they typically in theory only sell things that they really genuinely like. They may have sponsorships going on, or it may be just something that they love. And so people trust that. It feels like the professional version of user-generated content. Now, that is also very popular in the West. And this is where we get very interesting when you have AI overlaying user-generated content. So we have this across the whole globe, where you have things like TikToks or Instagram Reels of somebody, for example, showing a recipe that they're cooking. And then you kind of put this through your AI, which may be an app that you're using, and it will then automatically break that recipe down into the constituent ingredients and associate it with a particular grocery e-commerce site. And then you basically press the button and all the items are sent to you. Or you could do the same thing with user-generated content about somebody traveling, and you see a short-form video of somebody on their holidays. You put that into your AI app, and it will automatically create a full itinerary for you, having identified where the person is, what hotel they're staying at. You can use the AI to customize to your budget, to the timing you want to go. As we move forward with that becoming agentic, and perhaps us using an agentic browser like Perplexity's Comet, for example, in the West. So everything you're looking at online, every website, you are accompanied by an AI assistant, an agent. It sees what you see. You can ask it questions, ask it to summarize, ask it to actually make purchases for you at the best price, or wait until the price comes down. And essentially, people have got a little kind of assistant sitting on their shoulder, watching what they're watching online, but it's making intelligent decisions for you. Now, that's the early stages at the moment. There are privacy concerns. It's not for everyone. Obviously, young people are less concerned about privacy and so on than the older populations. But I do certainly see that as a direction of travel.
That sounds exciting and very handy for planning holidays. But there's another area of the market which is looking to grow across the board, which is the secondhand clothing market. Now, according to ThredUp, the global secondhand apparel market grew 15% in 2024 alone and is projected to reach $367 billion by 2029. That's almost triple the growth rate of all apparel. Kate, would you say this resale trend is driven more by environmental values, affordability, or is it the thrill of finding something really unique?
I think it's all of those. I think it's a combination of things. Cost of living crisis, people having concerns about, having reached peak stuff. Nobody needs more stuff in their wardrobe. In many cases, actually, what they want to do is swap things out that they don't wear for new things that give them that dopamine boost because it's new to them. But it isn't going into landfill because you're not just sort of buying sort of fast fashion, wearing it once and then throwing it away, which of course, should and does have environmental concerns associated with it. So I think it's a combination of things. I was, staggered to read recently that I think in the Q1 of this year, 2025, in France, Vinted, which is the secondhand platform, is now the largest fashion retailer by volume in the whole country. Now, Vinted has absolutely taken the West by storm. I don't know anyone that doesn't sell items and buy them on Vinted. And it's not always to make huge amounts of money, although some people do, because you're selling items usually quite inexpensively, but you're just clearing space of things you don't wear. And so I think it's lots of factors combined. But I actually personally think, whilst it's a challenge, of course, for regular fashion retailers, I think it's actually a very good thing for both the consumer and the planet.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about those reselling apps, because I'm also a big fan of Depop, which is another one. But a key driving factor behind this growth is the Gen Z buyer. Thrifting and buying secondhand has become very popular among Gen Z. Why is it so popular?
Well, there's very high unemployment amongst Gen Z. There's, significant concern about future employment prospects in an AI era. There's already disruption of many jobs that would have been entry-level jobs for young people. So there is a cost of living crisis in many countries still. And so people can't actually afford new in many cases. People are, even, previously sort of considered middle class people are looking for bargains. And secondhand is perfect for that. I mean, it's, usually a third or less than its new cost. Once you've started to, indulge in these secondhand apps, then you start to look at kind of regular store prices and think, whoa, this is so expensive. How can people afford this, particularly in things like luxury? So luxury appeals to a thin slice of high net worth individuals, but for everybody else, generally speaking, they're not just looking for bargains. Actually, they're increasingly looking for ways to actually make money, not just spend money. So we're seeing, the massive growth of things like, gold smelting ATMs in Shanghai. I mean, people are queuing around the block at these ATMs to put old gold jewelry that they don't wear anymore into the ATM. It actually melts it down, and half an hour later, you have actual hard currency in your bank. So, this is a trustworthy system. People are loving it. It's expanding very quickly. It's the kind of thing I could imagine being in a bank branch of the future. People are accustomed to the gig economy, particularly in the West. People have little side hustles, particularly young people. They need to make extra bits of money wherever they go and whatever they do. So I think AI and these apps which allow you to sell things or do little extra jobs are actually definitely going to stay with us for the future.
And on those apps again, so Vinted and Depop, how do you see these models evolving? Do you see them changing in any way?
I think they're going to become more and more personalized to you. And I think in the same way that we've seen storytelling evolve, I mean, really modern retail is storytelling. People want real people that they align to, that they perhaps aspire to or find funny, or they like their ethics, or they like their knowledge. And increasingly, that's also not just short form, but long form, because we see that with the whole kind of podcast culture. People will increasingly want to follow others that they trust and like, and buy the things that they're selling, look at the things that they're recommending. Same for new as is for secondhand. So I think it's about peer-to-peer is definitely absolutely going to grow forever. People buying from real people, because I think the balance has shifted in power from the brand and the retailer selling to the consumer, and it's now much more the consumer or the peer selling to their peers, particularly with Gen Z, because they don't really trust. They don't trust governments, they don't trust institutions, they don't trust brands, they trust each other.
And unfortunately, we're running out of time. So I have one last question for you. Looking forward, if you had to make one bold prediction for what retail would look like in 2030, what would it be?
We're probably heading towards a world where nearer to half of the items bought are bought on e-commerce, which we already see in South Korea. I think that's one of the most advanced, and that's way ahead of the US, for example. So e-commerce will grow. More efficient delivery, drones will grow. I personally think smart glasses will have a big impact on retail in the next few years. We will have agentic personal assistants, be very customized to us and our personality. They'll be speaking to us in our ear. They'll be seeing what we see in glasses through our specs, and they'll be assisting us with what we see in physical retail environments. And I think it's about AI optimization. peer-to-peer storytelling and the AI connecting all of those dots for us so that we have a completely seamless system. Anything we see, anything we experience online, click, we can just chat to our agent and have it delivered home.